we all need to support him on this. This is the damn problem with boxing, okay? The fact of the matter is Ryan Garcia is undefeated. Gervonta Davis is undefeated. They're both knockout artists. Terrence Crawford is undefeated. Errol Spence Jr. is undefeated. Why the hell are we not getting these fights? Because promoters are holding the sport hostage and depriving the public of the fights we desperately want to see. Ryan Garcia is big time. Gervonta Tank Davis, that is the miniature Mike Tyson from Mike Tyson's heyday. Gervonta Davis is special. I consider him a top 5 fighter on the planet right now. And don't get me started with Crawford and Errol Spence. The fact that these guys are looking to fight, ready to fight, want to fight, but is being held up by promoters is the problem with boxing.
Regardless of what people want to say about Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford, there's something to talk about when in boxing we can't get fights that easily should be made, primarily between Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis. Now, people put a lot of pressure up on Tank Davis to perform and give them the fights that they want. But the question that we never ask is, does his team want those fights that the fans are claiming that they want to see Gervonta Tank Davis in? Because we know that these boxers are not ruled solely by what they want to do. You know, they're told and they listen to the plan of their team. But it seems to be, when it comes to big fights being made, when it comes to the PBC side of things, it just doesn't get done. And we're all scratching our head wondering why. We have already accepted the fact that majority of the fights that the fight fans want to get, we don't get. So to a certain degree, we have accepted a level of mistreatment. But when it comes to PBC and getting these fights made, these guys have went overboard with it. We went from getting some of what we want to none of what we want. And it just doesn't make sense. But one thing that you can do is you can compare, you can connect the dots with the situation, what seems to be with going on with PBC and getting fights done, and the fact that you're not seeing some of the biggest fights in boxing due to this very same reason of promoters, and they want to prolong fights or prolong a fight and to the point that you're no longer interested in seeing the fight. At one point in time, Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder was the biggest fight in boxing, period. Had everybody interested from hardcore to all the way down to casual. It's a fight that should have been made. It's a fight that we should have seen, but it's a fight that slipped right past our fingers. One of the biggest fights in boxing, one of the biggest fights that could have restored the reputation and the love of boxing, we didn't get. Now you got people going back and forth about Errol Spence and Terrence Bud Crawford, when it's not much to argue about, because one team has the track record of not giving you the fights that you want. But yet we seem to be spreading it out like it's this person's fault and it's that person's fault. But yet you could look at Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis' situation, and you could solely see what the issue is with other fights, because they still have the same issue when it comes to these two. And Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia shouldn't have no issue when it comes to getting this fight made, because for number one, they know what's going to produce revenue. They know what's going to sell. So at this point, for these two not to be able to come together is mighty suspicious. And on top of that, it's a huge letdown in boxing. It just goes to show that no matter what level you at or how big the fight is, they still treat it all the same as non-significant when it comes to the boxing fan. And this is the problem with the sport. So when you look at Anthony Joshua versus Deontay Wilder, or when you look at an Errol Spence versus a Terrence Bud Crawford, it shouldn't be no shock of why you're not getting these fights. But one thing that the boxing fan needs to ask themselves is, why are we not getting none of what we want? None of the time, ever. All the most interesting fights seem to be the hardest fight to make. And this is the thing about boxing. This is the only sport where being good, you can be penalized. Okay? It seems that everybody that's getting the work and everybody that get these paydays are people who are not threatening to the so-called, higher up fighter, or the so-called franchise fighter, or the so-called face of boxing. The only people that are getting shots are people who don't threaten the throne or don't threaten the supremacy of another fighter. But the people who are competitive, the people who are good fighters, the people who are just all around good talents, these are the ones who get starved out in fights. These are the ones who don't get the fights. Therefore, the best possible fights are never being made, because the boxer and his team seem to be taking the route of least resistance, which is why you heard Errol Spence talk about taking the easy route, which everybody accepted, but something that everybody should have found disgusting and deplorable, especially at the time when he said it, for somebody wanting to pursue undisputed and basically be the best in their weight division. So regardless of what people want to think, and regardless of what people want to talk about, whether it's this person's fault or that person's fault, we have a very obvious issue that we cannot get the fights that we want made in general. And the point is, where do you look to place blame for that? Where do you look to try to resolve what the issue is with that? And the only thing that you could do is trace it back to who seems to have the most problem getting these fights done, who has the potential to get these fights done, but they don't get the fight done. And when you think about it, it only comes to one conclusion. It only puts the responsibility truly in one person's ballpark, and that is PBC. Because regardless of what you want to say about Top Rank and everybody else, they still managed to deliver a good fight schedule. They still managed to deliver somewhat of what the people want. They still managed to deliver fights that people are interested in, even though they're not always the fights that we may want. They are fights that are good fights. Are they the top tier fights that can be made? No, they're not. But they still give us more than what PBC is giving you. You shouldn't have to pay pay-per-view to see Robert Helenius and Deontay Wilder, nor should these guys be getting paid $20 million for Deontay Wilder and $9 million for Robert Helenius. This is when I talk about how the fighters who are least threatening seems to be the one that's going to get these paydays and seem the one that's going to be getting these shots, because they're not really a threat to their main boxer or their premier boxer or the star of the show, so to speak. You know, and that seems to be a problem. Robert Helenius getting $9 million to fight Deontay Wilder is absolutely ridiculous. Now, Deontay Wilder getting $20 million to do what he do, you know, I'm not too much knocking. Deontay Wilder is a heavyweight. Deontay Wilder does have a fan base and whatnot. But the point is to pay pay-per-view and then to pay these fighters what you have been paying them for a matchup is likely as Robert Helenius and Deontay Wilder. It's not worth it. But it also explains why when it comes to putting on fights that they should be able to put on, they're not able to do it, because they waste their money on basically bold ass boxing cards and bold ass boxing matches like Robert Helenius and Deontay Wilder. Not saying it's not a good fight, just saying it's not pay-per-view worthy. And at the end of the day, this burns out the boxing fan. But they're worried and they're concerned about what sells and what don't sell. And I'm saying, how could they know when they never tried to put on a boxing card which pleases the boxing fan? Maybe they can see the residuals and the outcome that they want to see if they even tried a fraction of the time to get a boxing fans what they want. Because as of right now, we're not getting it. And that's the main point. Whether you want to cry it's Bud's fault, whether you want to cry Errol Spence's fault, the main point is we are not getting these fights, which to me serves the bigger issue rather than, oh, I want to point the blame over here, or, oh, I want to point the blame over here. We need to point the blame at the people who's ultimately responsible for getting these fights done. And at the end of the day, that puts it right back in the lap of the promoter. We're not getting the fights that we want because these promoters don't want to take their investment and actually gamble with it and risk with it, while like this sport is meant to do, because honestly, they don't have the talent and they don't have the confidence in the boxers that the boxers of the yesteryears used to have. These guys are just not on that level, and they know that. They don't fight the same. They don't fight the same amount of times a year, and they don't have the same character or heart that the throwback fighters used to have. Therefore, these box promoters are handling these boxers with a little bit more care and a little bit more delicacy, which is ultimately playing into why we can't get the fights that we want. Because you know what? To be quite frank and honest with you, these boxers and these athletes don't touch a candle to what used to be considered top level boxers. These guys don't come close to it. You know, so therefore you got a whole bunch of promoters that's scared to gamble with their product or even put some money behind it because they don't think they have enough talent to actually sustain or go anywhere significant without help, without trickery, without ducking, without dodging, without franchise champion, without taking tune-ups, without fighting sparring partners. And that's just the truth of the matter. But that's my opinion on it. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. Bruce Vane, I'm out.